Hello and welcome to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we'll turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, I just wanted to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Adobe. Our sponsors are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. And at any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, which does include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please use the hashtag #ArgyleDigital and follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forums. And I just wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from members. We have worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during today's sessions, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we will have set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on those questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Dion Eusepi, Director of Enterprise Architecture, Data and Cloud Integration and Automation Platforms at Stanley, Black & Decker. We are so excited to have Dion with us for his opening keynote presentation titled Generative AI Strategies for Success in 2024. Welcome, Dion. Over to you.
Greetings and welcome, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and looking forward to having a really great discussion today with everyone. Without further ado, why don't we get underway? Today's agenda includes a pretty ambitious set of topics, and obviously this is a very weighty and potentially even contentious subject area given the attention it's been given over the last year at least. But we're going to take a really good stab at trying to cover a broad perspective on strategy relative to the opportunities and some of the risks as well too. So in 2024, we saw an explosion that appeared to happen seemingly overnight. That disruption is part of an evolutionary process that really didn't. So we'll touch on that. Second, we'd like to really look at a maturity model. What is the natural progression of AI, specifically Gen AI, in an organization that lends itself to the most productive outcomes for large enterprises? I think this is really key in understanding the opportunity structure and finding a logical point of entry for an organization into that landscape. Next, we want to talk about democratization and automation in general. AI is really the natural outcome of a series of evolutionary steps that started with integration and automation of enterprise IT processes, core systems, and patterns, and has now culminated in a conversation and capabilities that are new and exciting. And we'll look at enterprise adoption patterns. What are they? What are some of the strategic use cases that a lot of enterprises are considering? And what really makes sense in terms of overall adoption for large and mid-sized enterprises? Then we'll look at safe zones. Governance obviously is a key issue. As I mentioned, there are rewards and there are risks. And a big part of that, as we know, is having a governance framework in place that provides some audit and oversight and some opportunities to carefully consider what makes sense, why, when, and for whom. So that risk and governance piece is really important. Now, as I mentioned earlier, disruption doesn't just happen. At times it might seem like it. The last time, if you put this all in perspective, these things happened, there have been a series of logical and somewhat seemingly illogical inflection points that we've experienced in this industry over the last 20 years. If you consider mobility as an excellent example, the launch of the iPhone was pivotal and very much an inflection point in technology by driving the presence of massive compute power in the palm of our hands with a a one-to-many ratio of network effect and application layer network effects, and social implications that were at the time unimaginable and have since then evolved to what we know today. But just as it had with mobility, it has more recently with Gen AI. Generative AI, as you see, I've footnoted at the bottom, is an artificial intelligence that can generate new content, text, code, images, and audio. But it isn't just content, it's context. As we've learned over the years with media in general and its presence on the web, and on devices and data, context is king more than content, and the combined elements of both content and context really are what drive Gen AI to be so pivotal and powerful. This context engine that not only understands context really well, but has the ability to have a conversation with you about it on a number of different levels, is what really makes this so transformational for IT and really for all facets of our journey in technology into the 21st century. But if you put it all in perspective, it didn't happen overnight. It's been part of a series of inflection points over time since as far back as 2014, including the advent of neural networks, which were truly pivotal in how they created an architecture, a transformer architecture that really helped us have a conversation about data, about a corpus or body of knowledge in natural language that is coherent, consistent, and contextual. And I think that's really the important thing to take away from this. While we've cited a lot of technologies here, it's really important to remember didn't happen overnight. How we got there from here is a series of foundational technologies that are building on each other over time. What's really different about this particular environment that we're in, if you put it all in perspective, is what used to happen in 2 years with social media like Twitter happened in just 5 days to the tune of 1 million users and 100 million in 2 months. That is a staggering accelerated growth rate, hyper accelerated adoption. The Chat GPT application, which is a type of generative AI application, which features a prompt for communication, a client software application that is the gateway to a conversation with a body of documents or body of knowledge, structured, unstructured data, relational data, you name it, that corpus or body of data and the contextualization of it is all manifested through a conversation with ChatGPT. And if you've tried it, that's awesome. If you tried it and loved it so much that you're paying for it, that you're excited by the opportunities with OpenAI and other like platforms with other vendors, then you understand how powerful it really is. But if you look at the acceleration rate, this is well worth our attention. And not a day goes by that something doesn't change that is truly transformational. What's really important as we participate this is not to be reactive in a negative way and not to put our heads in the sand. This time, we won't be waiting a decade for changes, for market adoption, for market saturation, for industry leadership to take place and common coalition across those industries. What we're seeing already at that rate that you saw on the last slide is this exponential adoption and growth rate that commands attention. But making a strategic move really means that you understand where you are in the food chain relative to how things are projecting. And if you put things in perspective, where we came from, the ability to manually write code, to create automation, to create applications to interact with systems of record, really culminated in some inflection points. Robotic process automation, or the kind of the crude chaining together of processes in an attended or unattended mode, was one step. The presence of APIs so that you have common interfaces to systems of record and integrating them with systems of engagement like mobile, desktop, web, IoT, et cetera, really created a means by which we could communicate with systems of record and have meaningful yet crude and brittle conversations with those systems. What's really started to take place is the presence of low code, no code, and that shift away from developer and engineering specific implementations, code specific middleware and heavy-handed integration with those systems towards a user interface that really doesn't require the command of a programmatic software engineering language. And that inflection point's really important because what it is now giving way to is this AI and machine language assisted guidance to develop those applications. We'd always imagined that code could write code, and it does, and it has. But now users can have conversations with systems to develop applications on demand. And that's taking place with co-piloting, as it's being termed in the marketplace by a number of vendors who have invested a substantial amount of money in carrying this notion of assisted automation forward. And if you look at the far right in terms of the peak of intelligence and productivity across the X and Y axis, AI first means now we shifted from this co-piloting mechanism where we now have a coding buddy to something that just results in a conversation with a body of knowledge and a contextual engine, a large language model to really help us build automation, answer questions, explore, discover, learn, retrain, enrich the model so that it can then anticipate our needs as users going forward. We're shifting away from heavy-handed engineering specific domain knowledge towards machine learning and large language model specific contextual knowledge that can be accessed by mere mortals. That shift is really important. And if you think about it, according to Gartner, by this time, 90% of integration vendors and advanced process automation, we're shifting to APIs already and remote robotic process automation. And many of these existing platforms already have GenAI features in them to support these conversations to build automation and to expose these systems of record with systems of intelligence and systems of record and systems of engagement. And AI is what is bridging this gap. So consider in your strategy that maturity matters. And when you look at what's happened, my note that this shift in competency specific power and energy around domain knowledge, engineering knowledge, and that need, it's really increased our reliance over the years on IT, on the centralization of IT, and shifted it away from line of business. What's happened probably within the last decade at a highly accelerated rate is the shifting to the left towards line of business users, the shifting toward the left towards SaaS application users and power users. And while data scientists and engineers are certainly absolutely critical, and integrators are, the thrust of our capacity is really shifting through enablement models that emphasize and shift power left, not power right. And indeed, what's also happening is there's a perceived shift in business benefit towards that capability shift down to business users. And that's been happening at a stepwise rate, incremental, but noteworthy. So when you look where we are collectively as an industry, when you talk about IT and business capabilities, getting grounded with an adoption strategy is everything today, right now. If you're like most, you have entertained thoughts of adoption, what that looks like for an enterprise, only 4% of large enterprises are really exploring Gen AI in terms of concrete use cases. The more deeply concerning issue is that probably more of them than that are not only just considering it, they're actively blocking access to things like ChatGPT and other clients or fear of, intellectual property risks, security risks, all which are valid concerns. That said, we have to really strike a balance between our intellectual curiosity, the business capabilities we see powerful enablement potential in, and the actions that we take. And striking that balance in the right combination, I think, is really everything. So when you look at that 4%, really consider the fact that POCs are pretty important and that having a plan really matters. It's important that 20% of the overall population is considering, but I think really having a plan, as evidenced by the path forward, is really everything. And there are opportunities to implement that plan across the spectrum of different enterprise use cases here you'll see for generative AI in general. This ability to have a conversation within different business domains cuts across our customer engagement models, our internal systems of record, our systems of engagement, because it intersects now as systems of intelligence. And when you think about that, where we were only a short time ago was here, the ability to interact between our systems of record and systems of engagement with integration or automation layers and abstracted applications that helped us have very structured, extremely structured, but sometimes very brittle, not interactive, and rarely contextual, and sometimes almost contextual to a fault where they're engineered for context around a specific line of business. That this fundamental shift in Gen AI now means that having an intelligent conversation about a specific domain with a specific system of record that lends itself to interaction with a system of engagement is the pivotal change. These conversational and outcome-based actions that we can now trigger through those conversations means that automation is in the power of our hands. So when you think about this all in terms of what are the foundations for enterprise ready AI, you really have to think in terms of what are the context inputs from those systems of record on the right. When you look at things like CRM and ERP systems, human resource management systems, supply chain management systems, you really have to wrap the contextual inputs around it, how we get it in a large language model, how we safeguard that large language model so we're training within a gated domain that is specific to the enterprise and is not potentially injected with risk, is really a considerable consideration as you move forward with it. What this means is that we can build machine learning models that ultimately train large language models on context, add rules, add a corpus of documents that have vector databases with embedded references to those documents, and rules engines that help us tell us who, what, when, where, and how, based on the context of the inquiry and engagement. That is, who's asking, what their role is in the enterprise, what their privilege levels are in the enterprise, and what the context for their line of business really is. The merging, the consolidation of these three things: contextual input, insights generated by systems of intelligence, and the underlying infrastructure to support it, and automation with systems of engagement, mobile, desktop, document management, systems of insight as well, business intelligence systems are really, really key to making this all work. Think of it in terms of phases where we've been. It'll help, I think, help large enterprises land better in terms of what we can do and what's probably not feasible just yet. In terms of phase one, before 2017, there's fairly widespread adoption of some form of crude or highly refined analytical AI with limited data sets that were really targeted in the organization and definite investment. Many organizations started to adopt data science organizations to hire data scientists and engineers and to approach it from that vantage point. But what's happened now is we're definitely in a wave two, which might be perceived as a hype cycle, meaning we're reacting to the newness, the novelty novelness of the opportunity, and we're trying to build these foundational models as the capabilities seem to be accelerating past human performance, which means there's huge opportunities to take those commodity-based business processes and wrap Gen AI conversations around them to speed up, accelerate our time to market and our capacity to compete in the market. And then finally, phase 4, the rewards stage, which is really making it cheaper to deploy these models, having gating factors around security and more productive explosion. So really think of it as a conversation, inputs with this client-based prompt that you're having a conversation with that could be a person or it could be a process. It could be an API. It could be an automation orchestration where that prompt is having a conversation with a system of record through an integration interface or an automation interface. It's performing an operation relative to its large language model and its context for that inquiry. And an action is assigned to it that could either be expressed as output to a user or posted to another process or API or automation. This large language model interaction is either programmatic, system-based, or human-mediated. Those two opportunities now mean that you can string together actions and outcomes in meaningful ways with humans and systems. I mentioned gating. You really have to look at this framework. I think this Gartner framework really does a really good job of looking at the types of typical operations we have relative to the enterprise, where they land organizationally, and the degree of centralization and oversight you really want to exercise with it. See, the black zones and the red zones are where typically IT plays with a high degree of audit and oversight, and the lower hanging fruit, if you will, the CRUD operations and more commodity-based workflows and automations in the green zone, where there's less perceived need for audit and oversight, less security risk, and more emphasis based on enablement and driving end user adoption. This citizen automator or democratization factor is really important, but it can provide a really good framework. In summary, Gen AI is a critical inflection point. We should not ignore it. The rate of acceleration has been exponential. It's now multimodal, means that communication, that conversation can take place with text, images, sound, video, and audio. And that vision capability is astounding. And we're seeing multimodal begin to emerge as the dominant theme in the conversation you can have. The maturity curve can be steep, but the inflection point means that the tooling and the foundations and the core systems and the systems of engagement and those systems of intelligence are already beginning to intersect by default, if not by design. We want this to converge by design as enterprise architects. We want careful, thoughtful, and opportunistic planning, but we also want to recognize that it's changing every day, and that where we start isn't where we finish, but we have to start. And I think we need to understand the implications for the enterprise and the opportunities through risk management frameworks, AI governance, and an understanding of our systems of engagement and the opportunity structures and use cases where it makes sense. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope this has been helpful. And I'll stop here for questions. Looks like, let's see, Lindsay, you have one question. Two questions. Knowing that only 4% of large enterprises are mature and using Gen AI, where would you put Stanley Black & Decker on that scale? I think we, to our credit, we did a really good job of not just putting the brakes on and being highly prescriptive. We created a sandbox for users to be curious, and that intellectual curiosity, I think is really important. Not blocking the insecure use of it, I think would have been a mistake. So getting started means you create a sandbox, you create an environment where lines of business can experiment, where you create fusion opportunities between business capability leaders and technology specialists that become really productive and outcome based. Question 2, when considering the most impactful use cases for investment in generative AI, are there specific industries or business functions where these applications are proven to be particularly beneficial? I would say customer support is really the low-hanging fruit. Customer support with a sales context, extremely useful, because you're seeing the automation of really routine processes really come to life very, very quickly. You're seeing that manifest itself, and you already saw it with conversational bots. The problem with those conversational bots on websites and those systems of engagement was that they were brittle. Now, the level of intelligence through engagements with large language models means the conversations your customers can now have with you about order management, about pricing, about inventory, about availability, product-specific capability questions, means that you've now increased your scale, you've refocused manpower, labor on higher value operations and capabilities, and you've defocused it on commodity processes. Can you provide practical insights into how IT leaders can strike the right balance between scaling AI initiatives and maintaining ethical and responsible practices within their organization? I think moving is important. Moving too quickly is even more important. So find the right use case, find the appropriate point of entry that makes sense, value relative to business capability, value relative to weighted risk and opportunity, and perceived and actual reward, monetization of it. How can we extract efficiencies from it in a more meaningful way? How can we drive greater scale across the spectrum of our customers and our install base? And how can we reduce redundancy in the organization where it simply doesn't make sense to continue a lot of these commodity processes that are driving cost and they're not necessarily driving correlated value? Interesting information. I would like to know if there are tools that allow auditability of AI learning within existing security standards, norms, and compliances. I think we're really seeing some interesting things take place in the infrastructure space. So when you start to look at cloud infrastructure and the ability to have conversations with systems of intelligence about infrastructure, in particular cloud infrastructure, you have greater insight to how the language models are actually being used, who's using it, and for what purposes. But those really require the implementation of some technologies like retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, which allows you to have separate paths of inquiry that are more secure to a enterprise-specific document corpus, rather than a large language model like OpenAI that could be publicly available, where it wouldn't obviously be wise to train enterprise-specific data in a large language model that is publicly available for obvious reasons. What use cases did Stanley Black & Decker start with? I don't think we're there yet, or I can really talk about that with any degree of concreteness. I will say that we had a foray in conversational bots, right, already, where you have a lot of these kinds of very typical structured and sometimes brittle conversations, and that might make sense to really build on that with our use of websites. But beyond that, I would say we're not unlike others in consideration. So I thank you for your time. And I really appreciate all your thoughtful inquiry, and I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you.
What a great presentation, Dion. Thank you so much for joining us for this. We're getting some fabulous feedback already. I'm sure you're going to hear from some folks. I wanted to remind the audience that this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the session. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this session. Thank you again, Dion, for a fabulous opening keynote.
Thank you. Bye now.